Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avil, and today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Malur Narayan, who's the Vice President, Emerging Tech Sustainability Go-to-Market for Tata Consulting Services across North America. He's the co-founder of Strides.ai. He's a startup mentor, diversity champion, and a mental health advocate with over 3 decades of global experience in advanced technologies. Today, the topic of discussion is going to be AI for good, emerging tech, and sustainability. So, Malu, really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. It would be great if you could start with a bit of your background, your journey in the field of AI, machine learning, emerging tech, and sustainability.
Thanks, Eddie. So my journey actually started with AI. Started in 1990 when I went to Canada to do my master's in machine learning. And that was a fascinating experience. Those were very early days. AI was not as fashionable as it is today. Those couple of years that I spent there working in research were really very influential for me in terms of raising interest and creating a great deal of hunger in that space. Ended up creating a very unique algorithm called a reinforcement algorithm called adaptive set training algorithm, which later on was published and became kind of the early seeds of reinforcement learning, and what you see today has been built out quite a bit. I moved into a career. I started a PhD, but then dropped out of it because I wanted to get more industry experience. So I moved into a company called Bell Northern Research, where I was able to practice some of the AI machine learning techniques, particularly in the reverse engineering concept, being able to take millions of lines of software code and create visualizations. This was before the days of code visualization techniques that are available so easily today. So we had to build that out for proprietary language called Protel, which is a combination of C and Pascal. So that was a very interesting experience. I built out a team there, and so I spent the first 10 years of my career mostly in tech, in development and engineering. The next 10 years, I moved over. I did my MBA and moved over more to the business side of it. Lived in many parts of the world, South America, Singapore. I was back in India for a bit, and then in Austin more recently. And then the last 10 years or so, or a little over 10 years, I've been with TCS, focused on a number of things, but largely around technology, customers, and helping for technology solutions for specific business problems. In parallel, my interest over the last 8 to 10 years has also been on the entrepreneurial startup side. I worked with many startups in helping them build technology for good, right? So we talked about Strides, which is a platform that enables emerging leaders, underrepresented leaders, women, people of color, etc., to network with senior leaders like board members and C-suite. I'm involved with another startup called Latimer.ai, which is a large language model that is trained on Black history and Black culture to provide more inclusive AI. All the AI startup experience and work that I've done is largely around impact, social impact, which is either in the mental health space or in the diversity, DEI space, or sustainability.
Well, thank you for sharing your journey. And like you rightfully pointed out, over the years, I think AI has gone through its ups and down cycles. And today, AI has become like the most important tech stack. Today, there are lots of emerging tech stack, but AI is really out there. You mentioned AI for good. Would you be able to elaborate on that? And would you also be able to kind of share some experiences or that you have built over the years in the space of tech for good, AI for good?
AI is just another piece of software, right? At the end of the day, it's just software that retains memory, learns using that memory, looks at historical patterns, and then makes predictions and intelligent decisions around that. And over the years, with the advent of neural networks, transformers, all of those things have gotten much farther ahead, especially in the last few years, um, in terms of being able to generate, whether it's text or images, etc. So all of those have created wildly different use cases than what were possible before, maybe 7, 8 years ago, which was largely or mostly around expert systems and decision making. Anything that's repeatable, anything that requires pattern, anything that can be predicted, those are areas that AI excels very well at, right? Especially if you have the right data, if you have the right data sets, if you have the right algorithms, and you have the right guardrails and safety net, you can build something that is truly magical. But it also comes with a lot of dangers, right? Particularly human beings themselves have a lot of biases built into them. So we are inherently biased because of our own upbringing, our cultures, and therefore all of that is manifested into our own data that's used to train AI systems, and in the algorithms that we build, because we make algorithms that are essentially decision making tools, and decision making is inherently biased because of our own internal human biases. In terms of when I look at AI for good, the three areas that I described before, those are my focus areas for a number of reasons. One is DEI, because I came here to America in the early 90s as an immigrant. And I faced some of the challenges that everybody faces in a new culture, trying to make it in a in a new environment where you're a minority. So that, for me became a point that I resonated with, both in terms of gender equality as well as in terms of equality in general for everyone that is trying to get access to services, opportunities, etc. So that was one area. The other area that I've been passionate about is mental health, because I had a brother who passed away 4 or 5 years ago. He was schizophrenic. He suffered from schizophrenia for majority of his life, older brother. And I know for a fact that, the 45 years that he was suffered through that, and we supported him. It was very difficult, both as caregivers as well as the patient themselves. So I knew that technology can play a role in helping. Anything we can do to remove the stigma, help provide greater access to support and resources is going to be critical. And the third element is environment, because that's something I'm passionate about. Grown up in a culture and environment where conservation was very, very important. So for me, that's very critical. So those are three areas that I've focused on largely in remove the stigma, any of my work around AI. And as far as AI's the actual practical implementations, Strides.ai was one of the first ones where, and the problem we were solving was that to break the old boys club, if you will, in corporate America and in the corporate world in general. How do we get greater access for women into those leadership roles that is usually hired by people, right? And so we wanted to replicate that in the for people who don't have that necessarily that same level of network and access. So we created Strides AI as a way to help anyone be able to access a group of leaders like board members, C-suite, CXOs. And then a few other projects I've been involved in. One is called Storybolt, which is also run by a friend of mine. Her name's Nasim. She's originally from Iran. And she uses Storybolt as a way to the power of documentaries, using storytelling and documentaries to impart education and information about a variety of topics like suicide prevention or DEI or any of those related topics to companies who need that. So that's an area that I was involved in as an advisor, investor. Another one is Latimer AI. I just spoke about that. I'm involved in that as a technical advisor, helping them build out their technology platform, which is essentially a large language model. And it got me interested because if you look at large language models like ChatGPT and any of the other ones that are available, they're all trained on public domain data, which are largely, which are heavily, uh, dominant towards one type of um, mainstream data, right? Because that's data from the internet. Most of it is skewed in a certain way, and it is not representative of the larger world population. So it's very important to make sure that because LLMs can have people believe everything they read, right? So large amount of people believe everything they read on the internet. So if you're going to ask a ChatGPT a question, you get a response. 90% of the people will believe everything that's said, even though some of it may not be factual.
So,
And we know that LLMs hallucinate a lot. When they don't find the data, they make it up. And that's where we wanted to. So what Latimer does is, and he started this last year to really get data, data from licensed sources like newspapers. Last 100 years of newspapers called Amsterdam News, which is a black newspaper. Um, uh, Textbooks and dissertations that are factual, white papers, articles. So the model is trained on that type of data, which is factual, and therefore, when you ask it a question, it is more likely to give you a more contextual response, more nuanced response, specifically if you are asking about race or about African American culture, black heritage. And similarly, we've got a lot of interest when people asking, hey, can you build an Arab GPT, or can you build something for Sudan or for the Caribbean? So, um, LLMs, AI can be a very powerful tool in restoring some of the history, restoring some of the lost languages that are no longer spoken. Sanskrit is a great example of how you can have um, old language, ancient languages be restored if you train the model in the correct way and have it available to people.
right, right. Well, I want to get into the mental health space. You mentioned that AI could be leveraged. I mean, can you elaborate on that? Because mental health obviously is a huge, huge problem. All age groups are facing, and the world is getting more and more competitive. The businesses or even the education space. I mean, at least here in India, there are so many students who are. Who are committing suicide and things like that. So mental health. I mean, can you elaborate on how AI can be leveraged over there?
Mental health is such a broad space, right? I mean, when people talk about mental health, there's things like anxiety. There's things like more. I mean, people categorize even simple things as mental health. I don't want to belittle that, but there's such a broad topic that when you say mental health, it can range from something simple to something very complex, which is more chronic. Um, my sister and I, her name's Rangashri. We run a foundation in Bangalore called Srivatsa Foundation, but it's under the banner of Brilliant Minds .in. And part of that, what we try to do is to encourage more chronic cases, so help with caregivers, helping with patients, and get them access to simple things. And so the way that we use, technology can be used is in multiple ways. Number one problem for mental health, especially when it comes to chronic cases, is the whole issue of stigma, right? Because stigma is so prevalent in that space. Anybody, that issue of mental health is hidden from a very young age, and it's not talked about, and therefore, there's no opportunity. A lot of the opportunity to solve the problem or to provide medication or counseling is lost in the early years of life because of the stigma associated. So number one, AI can help in this significantly. I invested in a company called Stigma App, where people who have been through that patients themselves can tell stories about how it's like TikTok for mental health. Think about it as another one in India called jumpingminds.in is one where anyone can ask a question anonymously and get a response around mental health, around suicide prevention, around anxiety, all of these things. There are so many different factors that are. So AI tools can help significantly in terms of reducing stigma, in terms of awareness, in terms of access to resources. A great big problem not just in India, but even here in the US, is that there are a lot of resources available, government resources as well as private resources available, but not everybody knows what they are, right? And people are afraid to ask because of the stigma associated with it. And it's not easily so a marketplace that includes all of that and you also don't know which of those are good resources and which are not, and which are the, if you're talking to a certain therapist, you don't know whether it's somebody you can trust or somebody you can't trust. So these are things that a simple marketplace with intelligence around predictive abilities can help. And then the third or fourth element is really around personalized tools. Every individual, as personalized AI agents become more prevalent, I foresee that we'll be able to have these AI agents predict episodes or certain mood disorders and be able to tell, hey, here's what's happening, here's what you need to do, here are some corrective actions, here's how you can restore your balance, here's how you can take corrective action,
Right.
both for the caregiver as well as themselves.
Right, right. Yes, it's so awesome. This tech is taking over in all of these unexpected spaces, And it's not just AI. I think neurotech is going to play a huge role with this invasive as well as non-invasive, which is obviously a little too far away. But then there are lots of companies who are kind of working towards, these neurological disorders in the space of Down syndrome, ASD, depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth. We spoke about AI for good, and then obviously, I mean, that's all cool. I think AI is going to play a huge role in the next step of our evolution, and it's already democratizing things in ways like, I mean, today, I mean, anybody and everybody's got access to technology because of AI. There are these Gen AI tools which does text to image, text to 3D, text to video, text to world building, and so on and so forth. So awesome. But then also there's AI, which is AI for bad. I mean, I wouldn't say it's AI for bad, but would want to get your views on the other side, which is, the centralized AI, which is owned just by big tech, then there's AI job loss, which is automation, because, there is more and more AI tools that's being created, which is in the next few years possibly going to play a huge role in these job losses. Then you spoke about large language models, that they are being trained on data. Whose data? Copyrighted data, right? And then there is these AI hallucination. You already pointed out, in a world where students and enterprise, they're all using it. They believe it as the final truth. Then you step a little bit forward, then there's AI, which is being militarized. There are these robots, which are being used. There are drones, which is autonomous killer robots and stuff like that. Then you come into AI misinformation. We in the space of election India. So misinformation. We already know with Web 2.0 and big tech brands like Facebook, what happened, with the election space. Then there's AI deepfakes. I opened up a lot of these spaces. Obviously, AI is going to be like, it's a tool. I mean, I'm not trying to blame the technology, because I think technology per se is never good or inherently bad. It's humans. It's how we use it. But for the first time, I think we're sitting in a point of human history where that we are creating a tool which is self-learning. What are your thoughts on this?
So I have a lot to say about this because, I 2 weeks ago I spoke at MIT about AI bias and about in fact, last week we published a paper on how to detect bias, how to mitigate bias in LLMs. So that's itself is a big topic on its own because bias can manifest itself in many ways and can have huge implications downstream, whether it's in criminal justice systems, whether it's in the way that people are recruited, whether it's in the way people are provided government services. A system called Compass that is used for criminal justice here in the US, where they look at past records to determine whether somebody is going to commit a crime in the future. And the problem with that is that, African Americans and Black in general, who have a higher percentage of criminal records, tend to be targeted, sometimes even falsely. just because the system, is trained to do that. Uh, Take an example of, sentiment analysis tools are used in many marketing applications and, consumer products, etc. And sentiment analysis, there are 200 different types of sentiment analysis tools, but pretty much all of them use a mixture of words to determine whether a sentiment should be positive or negative. Now, if I replace the name of a person, let's say I'd say Jane went to meet Jack, right? Or Jane had an argument with Jack. It'll give, because the word argument is that it might give a slightly negative sentiment, but it'll generally be positive. But if I replace Jane and Jack with, Ahmad or another name, which is non-traditional, non-white, then it will change the sentiment to negative. Or if I change it from male to female, it'll have a different sentiment score. So these subtle biases that both are driven by data and by algorithm can cause a huge downstream ramifications in terms of how AI is perceived and how AI is used in a variety of different applications. The big tech is using humanity as a test bed, right? If you think about how software was developed in the past, it went through rigorous testing, months of testing before it was released. And then you did a beta test, you release it to a limited set of customers, and then you release it to a larger audience. When you think about ChatGPT and all of these, LLMs being released, I think just last week there were 4 LLM models released, right? Do you think they're doing the same amount of rigorous testing that that we've gotten accustomed to? I mean, we're using human beings as a test bed today, right? And the problem with that is each of these have the same, carry all the same flaws. Data lack of diverse data, lack of accuracy. Hallucinations, has built-in bias, and that means that most people won't be able to trust it as a way to they can't take it as gospel, right? And that's why enterprises are very, very careful about how they use LLMs. They can't just provide access to people and assume that everything that you cut and paste from a tool is going to be accurate. So so what I'm saying is, I think big tech we're really trying to sacrifice safety for speed in many ways. As users, we need to be able to lobby for proactive regulation, stronger industry standards, and really support any investment that happens in AI ethics and safety research. Now, I know a lot of people say, regulation is not good, it's going to curb innovation. But, innovation without regulation is a disaster waiting to happen. That's number one. Number two, researchers and practitioners, people who are building these tools, implementing these tools, need to ensure that they build evaluation frameworks at the same time. So if I'm spitting out a response, a text, I need to also say how accurate it is. Not just say, hey, it's up to you to believe or not believe. I mean, that's, I think, kind of is where we are today. But really, that you should have a score that says this is 90% accurate or 70% accurate, or I've derived this data based on my own hypothesis. So take it for what you will. Those disclaimers need to be put in place so that people understand what they're looking at may or may not be true. And the third is, of course, is business leaders, particularly in big tech, and those who are implementing and paying millions of dollars for these solutions, need to take a step back. They kind of need to slow down and really embrace more responsible practices that we have done over the years for many other safety critical industries like aerospace, healthcare, medicine, nuclear energy, right? These are areas where, we had great innovations, but we put in regulation in place to make sure that those guardrails, those safety practices are still practiced.
Yeah, so I think there's two camp. There's one camp is obviously in the tech maximalist, says okay, let's break boundaries. The other is slow it down. But these I don't see like a middle ground where where you're moving with where it's a common good, because I think we live in a world which is profit at any cost, and you rightfully pointed out. I think at the rate at which I think tech companies are shipping out products, there are no no restrictions per se, because at least, in the health industry, when you kind of creating a drug, it goes through these various cycles, clinical trials and so on and so forth. But I think, when you're pushing out a application, it's directly, okay, whatever you have, you can just, ship it out, So I hope that, we come to a world where, I mean, especially with AI, because for the first time in human history, I think we get coming towards a tech which is going to be self-learning. Just I want to, I mean, spend some time on the job loss bit, because I mean, it's so very exciting, when we have these tech stacks tool, because like there's one part of me, it's like super excited that, oh, I mean, today for the first time in human history, I mean, you don't really need to understand code, but you can just sit with the computer, you can put in some prompts, and you can have like a application completely built out. You don't really need to be a 3D artist. When you create a game, you put in a prompt and you get a 3D asset. And it's looking so very exciting. It's looking exciting in the form from the media and entertainment space, and every space, because there's Sora, there's Udio, and it's like really doing cool stuff. And we're still in 2024, where it's still in its nascent stage. I worry about what would the world look like in another 10 years, say around like 2034 or 2035, with these, because with us, I think the humans, we have a limited cognitive capabilities, whether 80 billion neurons with 100 trillion synapses, that's that to it. But with a computer, I think, you can completely keep on adding the GPUs and grow the stack. And so what I'm trying to say is that, with these LLMs and Gen AI accelerating at a breakneck speed, what do you think the future of work is going to look like? What all jobs are going to go completely kaput, which is going to disappear off the face of the earth?
Well, certainly a lot of the knowledge worker jobs are under threat, right? If you think about tech jobs itself, that itself are under threat because many of those things can be automated, especially anything that has to do with programming, anything that has to do with configuration, anything that requires setup that can be done by a computer can be automated. And the thing about what you talked about is the difference between a machine and human beings is that the machine can do certain things very quickly at scale at lightning speed, and that's what makes it very, very efficient for purpose-built tasks. So certainly, I think a lot of jobs are under threat, particularly that are more repetitive, things that are bit more have less reasoning and more programmatic. Those jobs will very likely disappear. I'm even looking at many administrative tasks that could disappear. Right. What will not disappear is obviously anything that has a physical requirement. Despite the advent of robots and all of that, there's still a lot of basic things that need to be done in the real world, which a robot will take many, many years to do, right? Like simple thing like mowing your lawn, right? It's not going to be as easy doing with the robot in the way that it needs to be done. But one of the key things that everyone's looking at in all the AI governance meetings or any other discussions I'm having is specifically around reskilling and upskilling. How do you take the current workforce that you have who are doing tasks that are repetitive, that are likely to be taken over by AI? How do you move them to jobs that are more that use AI as a tool to augment and speed up whatever task it is that they're doing? And I think that's going to be the major. So you don't need to know how to program, but you need to know how to use AI. It's like, creation of music, right? You talked about some of the tools that are coming up, and there's a tool called Suno.ai. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yep.
Basically creates, you can tell it what genre of music you want, what type of music you want. It'll write the whole song for you, sing it for you, and there you go. So, the creator's job is under threat, right? Whether it's an artist, a musician, and so it now requires the creators to be more smarter and use the tools that are available, just like filmmakers have used video editing tools to do better. Now they're going to have AI editing, and a lot of those jobs that are tedious in terms of editing can be replaced by a simple tool that can do it in 5 minutes.
Exactly, yeah, but then what? I mean, even right now, you mentioned about Sono, and there's Udio, which does that, and it does it in a very nice way. I mean, what happens in the 10 years time frame? When there are so many AI papers releasing, possibly every next day. So that's something which I kind of think about, because I think for the first time we have these tools which is gonna offload our cognitive capabilities, and that's where it gets a little scary. How do you see Gen AI, large language models impacting enterprise technology? What are the key opportunities and challenges?
One of the things about enterprise, when you talk about enterprise grade products, is that if you give it a sequence of inputs, if you give it the same inputs, you should get the same output. The problem with Gen AI is if you give it the same inputs 3 times, you'll get three different outputs, right? So the predictability of that, it's the strength of Gen AI is able to generate dynamically, and the weakness is also the fact that every time you generate, you get something else, and may or may not be 100% accurate, and that's really the challenge. So I think a lot of enterprises are working on um, framing it in such a way that you limit what the LLM can do. Now there are many of the solutions now contain not even LLMs; they contain SLMs or quantized version of LLMs, which are much smaller versions of the LLMs, where the LLM is only used to create generation content on the fly, but a lot of the other logic is built internally within the enterprise using using a retrieval augmented generation or other types of tools, other types of logic that creates algorithms that only uses the LLM when required in order to create new content.
So there are lots of companies who are like playing a wait and watch game, when it comes to emerging tech stack, or whether it's AI or ML. Is there any advice that you would like to give organizations, who are trying to looking at embracing, these emerging tech stack or AI?
I think the first one is regardless of which model you pick, LLM you pick, or which tool you pick, the first thing is to make sure that you're solving a particular business problem, right? And not just trying to use Gen AI for the sake of it. It's like the other day I posted something on LinkedIn about a person about a fan with a hose sticking out to water a lawn. I mean, when you get a simple sprinkler could solve the problem, you don't need to over-engineer the solution. So you don't need to use AI for everything, right? This is number one. So I think it comes down to what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Are you trying to solve it at scale? Are you trying to reduce the amount of time, free up time for staff, for your customers, for your employees? That's critical. And then when you're deploying it, I always like to start small, right? Make sure that you build something that is a prototype that's tested out on a smaller set of customers, iterate over time, and then build a larger and deploy the larger solution. So slow is always good. Speed is not always a great thing when it comes to AI deployment.
What's the future of AI and ML in the context of sustainability and environment? Because there's lots of companies who are kind of tinkering around the idea of leveraging AI in the space of environment also.
Yeah, I think in pretty much every aspect of sustainability, whether it's in the disclosures and reporting, that itself is a very time-consuming task for many companies, right? Complying to the various laws, both local laws, regulatory bodies, as well as the GRIs and the more the UN SDGs, etc. So companies spend a lot of time and effort and money in building those reports. That can definitely be automated, provided you can automate the data, the data collection part of it. So that's one. On the and the second part is around energy management. that I think AI can have a significant play in terms of being able to provide a better framework for assessing how energy can be optimized in different scenarios. Be able to give you different types of configurations, whether it's in a building, whether it's a plant, manufacturing plant. It'll give you different scenarios of what types of equipment to use, give you the best in terms of energy consumption. And the third is around emissions. Emissions can be optimized significantly if you understand where what's causing most of the emissions, how they can be reduced, how can be have the data around it, optimize the data around it, and create predictive algorithms that are able to provide that are able to optimize for the reduced emissions in each of those cases. Whether it's in petroleum industry, whether it's in manufacturing, the use cases are slightly different, but it's generally the same as far as how emissions could be reduced from an AI point of view. And then the fourth one is really around circularity. How can you make sure that your entire value chain, your supply chain, is optimized at various levels using technology like AR, VR, IoT, etc., to collect the data and then use AI to do predictive modeling, so that you don't need to invest a whole bunch of money to try something out and discover that, hey, this is not going to work. That can be preempted a lot.
Malur, really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Would you be able to leave us behind with your thoughts on what the next 10 years is going to look like, in the space of technology, and maybe also your moonshot? What is it that you are going after?
Well, I'll answer for a second one first. As far as what I'm going after is, I'm spending a lot of time, especially on my research stuff, around ensuring that we are building AI tools that can provide safety and mitigated bias. Right, I think that's very, very critical, because that has a lot of downstream impact in a variety of different use cases. And as far as what are the things, what's going to happen over the next 10 years? One of the things, quotes I saw the other day was that AI is not about building a Terminator, but AI is really about building a Terminator that can be controlled by John O'Connor, right? Now, it was falsely attributed to Elon Musk by one of the AI chatbots, which itself is a bias conversation on its own. But what's interesting to me there is, first of all, we shouldn't even be building a Terminator, right? And we should really be focused on building tools that are going to help humanity and that are going to make a significant impact in terms of the biggest problems that we have in terms of reducing poverty, environmental pollution, and equity of opportunities.
Right. Malur, really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Yes, I think mitigating bias is so very important, because today, most of the AIs today is built on just data. It's data in, data out. And it's learning from the data that we are kind of creating. So it's so very important to first possibly solve that. If we solve that, I think we'll get like a great tool for us that will augment us. And yes, I think we are sitting in a fantastic point of time. There's so many tech stack. I mean, I think the hype cycle is around AI, but there is so many other cool things which is going on, right from quantum computing to nanotechnology to neurotechnology to XR to Web3. And somehow from, because I have these conversations, I see that most of these tech stack are converging. And while they're converging, I think they are slowly but steadily, the power is shifting from the centralized to the decentralized space, and I think that would be like a game changer in human history, where like there will be like a larger group of people rather than just a bunch of people holding this technology. And I'm sure then we will be able to direct it to a place where it benefits the larger mankind. So I really hope that we go towards the world where all of these tech stack, I mean, becomes these tools to augment humanity so that we reach our true potential. So really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see and hear, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.